Hello, I'm Shon Holyfield, CEO and founder of HR Law Made Easy. Wanted to talk a little bit today about where many HR professionals spend their time, as well as just kind of bring to the conversation or dialogue and acknowledge some of the frustration that they've experienced over time. So, most HR professionals are focused on day-to-day issues, hiring, occasionally firing, pay reviews, making sure that people are getting paid correctly, so forth and so on. And in their spare time, they're supposed to magically transform into a time traveling lawyer to make the time to go read the over 1.5 million laws in the US. And then, out of having read those laws, understand specifically which policies, procedures, documents, agreements, notices, and posters and training that they need to have available for every location where their employees work in order to follow the HR laws. And that's like step one. Then obviously that's got to get out to their employees, and then they need to also magically know what employees need to do with these things, whether they need to sign, acknowledge, and or view those things, and then they need to find a magical way to store all that information so they can prove it later when somebody asks. That was a lot to cover in a very short amount of time, but the point of my doing that is to just really highlight that doing this manually or physically is an impossibility in the US. Once you've got more than 10, 15 employees, it's really borders on crazy to think that we can go do all of this using a single HR person or even a team of HR people. Large organizations struggle with this as well. So let's talk a little bit about HR compliance, because that's often what we get asked about. Well, how do we make sure that we're doing all the things that we're supposed to be doing? And then how do we then later prove it? And that's really HR compliance. So HR compliance, the definition of that phrase, if you will, is that a company is following the employment laws or the HR laws. That's what compliance is. Compliance means that I'm complying with, I'm doing the thing I'm supposed to do based on some rule that exists or something that I've been told that I need to do. At home, when I pick up my clothes off of the floor, I'm compliant with my wife's wishes that I don't leave my clothes on the floor. I'm not leaving clothes on the floor compliant. And there's lots of versions of compliance that are out there, but HR compliance is simply that I'm following the rules or laws that are out there that I'm supposed to follow. And if anybody were to come look or ask, I can just say, hey, I'm following these rules and laws. Got to be able to prove it. So that's really where I wanted to spend some time. And so often companies get caught up over here. They're really focused on what are the required things that I need to do. And they'll go to the internet, they'll go to ChatGPT or some sort of AI. Maybe they'll talk to an attorney. Maybe they'll go to a website that presents itself as having answers, which many of those websites do have some answers. But what's missing is that the people that they're talking to have not gone out and grabbed all of the 1.5 plus million employment or HR laws that exist in the US. They have not then organized it into the four buckets of law, to the codes, the regulations, the agency guidance, and the court cases. They have not then read this information to create a complete checklist that has a list of all the things that you're legally required to do based on the size of your organization, the industry that you're in, the nature of the work that you do, whether you're a private organization or you're a government agency or government organization. And then from that, create the policies, procedures, documents, agreements, grab the notices and posters, of which there's over 3,300 in the US, and then also create the training that your staff and or your employees may have to take. So what ends up happening is these websites that we go to, and you can Google this, it's worth Googling or ChatGPT, right? Go and ask Google or ChatGPT, how many total employment laws are there in the US? You're going to get either no answer, meaning that it'll say, don't really know, or you'll get a number of roughly 300 to 400,000, which ties into some of the federal laws that have been published and that the web crawler is able to go look at and see and bring back to you. There's well over 1.5 million laws in the US. As an illustration, there's like 20,000 federal cases that happen every couple of years, right? So you then go back 20 years and you've got 400,000 cases, like ignoring the codes and regs and agency guidance. So it's kind of interesting that they don't know, that the web doesn't know that. But But we do have all of those laws. We do have the exact numbers by state. For example, in Florida, there's over 918,000 laws that apply in the state of Florida at a federal, state, and local level. And that's a combination of codes, regs, agency guidance, and court cases, of course. So when we look at all these laws in order to create these things, right? And this is where HR spends a lot of their time, especially on policies, which if you're an executive or you're a business owner or you're somebody in HR, most of the time you're talking about the employee handbook. And the employee handbook is simply a collection of the policies, then policies or rules that we've been told by the government, by the laws that we've got to write and share with our employees and get them to either read, understand, and or acknowledge. And then that gets delivered, those little mini packages or envelopes, if you will, get put into a handbook and they get delivered to employees through a handbook. Other things we give to employees separately, but the focus is often on the content. And rightly so, because if you don't have a tool like HR Law Made Easy, you've got to go create all this content, hoping that it's correct. Or you have to hire a lawyer to create this content for you, hoping that they get it correct. So step one is usually, I want to go get all of the content that I need in order to give that content or stuff and things, as I like to call it, to employees. I need to go write the policies, create the policies, the procedures that are required by the law, documents, agreements. I need to somehow go get all the notices and posters, which a lot of times companies will get those laminated posters if you're in a physical office and put them up on a wall. But getting that out to remote employees is a bit of a challenge unless you have those digitally. So having those digitally, having all that stuff already in place, when you just like imagine coming to work and all of this content was just done. You log into HR Law Made Easy, you give the system your information, you create a workplace profile, it asks some questions, you answer those questions, and then what it does is it goes and it gets automatically all of this content, which is what HR Law Made Easy. So it really handles this first bucket, which is where most people spend all of their time focused on creating the content. So this typically takes months for a team to go update, review. Handbook reviews take months. What takes months takes minutes in HR Law Made Easy. But that aside, this usually takes months. And the most frustrating aspect of this, or part of this, if you will, is the moment you're done, it's now potentially out of date because there are thousands of law updates every year in the HR space. There were 1,274 law changes between October and December of 2025. And that doesn't include court cases, by the way. So that's like, then you stack on top of that the court cases, right? So there are thousands of law changes every year that can impact this content that you've spent all this time creating, which is really frustrating. So unless you've got your attorney constantly calling you, giving you updates, or unless you've got somebody who is constantly reading and monitoring and updating these laws, it's not likely that this content that you spend all this time creating is actually current and up to date. And in fact, in the free employee handbook reviews that we will often do for companies, we have never found a compliant employee handbook. It's actually never happened, and we've reviewed a lot of employee handbooks, and it's honestly because of this. It's usually that they got the policy that was required, but there was a law update that required this information to be included, and that wasn't caught, or nobody really knew about it, so it kind of slipped between the cracks. And a lot of the attorneys that use templated handbooks don't catch those things either. So most of the focus is on creating content. But when I talk with people about compliance, when I talk with people about following the law and make sure that you're following the law, I like to work backwards from what I actually need to be compliant. And that's really step 3, because I'm only compliant if I can prove it. It doesn't matter that I've got this content. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't make me compliant as a company if I have all this content and it's sitting on a bookshelf. It doesn't make me compliant as a company if I have every policy and it's perfectly written, but my employees haven't viewed, acknowledged, or read, signed that information. So really what I need is proof. I need proof of compliance. I need proof that my employee or employees read the policy, that they acknowledge the policy. I need proof that they understood the procedures or used the procedures, they signed the documents or the agreements, that they viewed the notices and posters that they're required to be able to view, that they did the training, and I can prove that they did the training. This is compliance, truly. So when we look at it in an organization and whether or not they're complying with or following the law, the thing that matters most truly is that I can prove that every employee did the thing they were supposed to do with the content. Now, there's three things that employees are required to do with content. They either need to view the content, that would be notices and posters typically. And there are laws or rules that are written by government that say that you not only need to put these posters up, but your employees need to be able to view them. So the solution historically was to put these posters up in like a break room and to have people view those. But there's no way to prove that my employees viewed that, which is why at HR Law Made Easy, we made these digital. In other words, we grab the digital images from the government, and when we send that out to an employee through the employee portal and they click on it, it grabs the time and day that they viewed it. And we can prove day and time that they actually viewed it. Because if you can't prove that the employees did the things that they need to do with your content, then it's impossible for you to actually be compliant if somebody questions whether or not you're compliant. So proof is the key important thing. Another example, many organizations have traditional employee handbooks, which are the large books that nobody reads. And it's kind of a running joke in HR is that, oh, geez, employee handbooks, maybe we'll give them like a caffeine bottle or some Red Bull or something to get through it. The problem with that is that when you're in court, if you end up in court, what judges ask is, can you prove that this employee read that policy? So say, for example, you're accused of discrimination and you've got an anti-discrimination policy. Check the box, you've got the right content. But you handed an employee a traditional physical handbook, and there's no way to prove that the employee read and understood that policy because you had a signature page either at the end or, God forbid, you put it at the front. Don't do that. But in any event, you have a single signature page and that's it. There's no proof or evidence that they actually understood and read that policy. Without that proof, the judges, and there are many court cases, over 16,000 court cases that have looked at handbooks and actually presented this question. This isn't like a handful of cases where judges have looked at this. There's a huge amount of cases out there where judges are asking the question, hey, I got that you've got the right content, but can you prove that your employee actually read and understood that policy? So that, again, is something that's got to be tackled. And a traditional handbook doesn't really get you there. It's why we created the handbook presentations with the videos, where the videos covered the high level, super easy to understand, key important pieces of information tied to every policy. And that video presentation, employees go through and they acknowledge every single policy. And as they click and they go through, you're capturing digitally and storing digitally the day and the time that they actually viewed that policy, listened to and watched the video. And when you end up in court, if you end up in court and are asked, can you prove that your employee actually watched or viewed or understood this policy, you can click right here and show that proof, right? So proof is really, really important for your organization to actually be compliant with the laws. It's not enough to just have the content, right? And then, of course, number two is you've got to find an effective way to get this information to employees. So get it to employees. Physical documents don't always do it. And one of the challenges with a lot of traditional methods is we try to put all this content together physically. Maybe we have a package, we have people sign this stuff. Then we've got to store that somewhere. And then we need to have it available for proof if and when we're asked to prove that employees did that. Having it digital allows you to go in and simply click on a button, pull up an employee compliance file, see everything that they've done and haven't done. And you can instantly then review your compliance if ever there's a question about whether or not you as an organization are doing the right thing. So imagine you've got 100 employees and you've got a file cabinet and somebody asks, hey, did all of our employees review the procedure and acknowledge this specific procedure we were required to do? Your only solution is to go through all of those files physically, flip through and see if there's a piece of paper in there that somebody acknowledged or signed, and or ask another leader or trainer or somebody supervisor, like, hey, did we go over this? Did we record that? Do we have people sign a piece of paper? It is such a clunky process to go in and prove that your employees did this when you do it physically. By having all this digital in an employee compliance file, you can simply go into the employee compliance file, get a summary of who's done what, click on, filter by those employees that haven't done the procedure, pull that up, share the procedure with them digitally, get them to acknowledge it, and then it gets stored in their employee compliance files for proof later on. So when we talk about proof of compliance, or we talk about compliance rather, proof is really where I start, because if I can't prove that we're compliant, what's the point in spending all this time creating content? What's the point in spending thousands of dollars with an attorney or trying to do it on my own? Or what's the point of using HR Law Made Easy? Because even if you come into our platform and you get all the content by putting in your workplace profile and it delivers it all to you, if you don't take that next step to actually send it to your employees to make sure that they get it, and then follow up with them to get them to either view, acknowledge, or sign that content, then you're not actually compliant. So compliance is more than just having the right content. Compliance is all about delivering that content to your employees and being able to later prove that your employees viewed, signed, or acknowledged that content. That's ultimately what a court's going to look at. It's what anyone is going to ask about when they ask about compliance. And it's also just a complete solution or way to go about HR compliance, which is to think about it from what's the end result that I need to have in hand, working backwards from that. And it's truly that you've got to have proof that your employees did these tasks, as well as understanding what they need to do with this required content. Because every one of these individual types of required content have slightly different things that you as an organization must prove later on if asked. So having all of this content, understanding what it is that employees need to do with it before you send it to them. Because if I don't know what to tell an employee, like, hey, I'm sending you this document, I need to let the employee know what they need to do with it, whether that's view it, acknowledge it, or sign it. So having all the content is really important. Knowing exactly what employees need to do with it is really important. Delivering it to your employees is really important. And then having a way to easily prove that employees did the thing that they're supposed to do with that content, so that you're in fact now HR compliant, is really the full view of HR compliance, or it's the whole life cycle, if you will. Hopefully this was helpful. And for those that are out there creating their own content, make sure that you understand what it is employees need to do with it. Make sure that you're getting it to your employees and that you can track that. And then super important is the proof. Because if you can't prove that your employees did stuff with this content, you'll end up being super frustrated that you spent all this time and money just creating this content for nothing. Hopefully that was helpful. Thanks.